After Iraqi forces invaded Kuwait in 1990, over 500,000 Americans, finest brave, fought to expel one of the largest military forces in the world. And once the dust settled, more than 300 brave men and women died as a result of their commitment to freedom and democracy. A major facet of our mission as an organization is to ensure those who have gone before us in war are remembered and honored properly. Time and time again, VFW members have spoken loud and clear in support of constructing the Desert Shield Desert Storm Memorial. We were the first major veteran service organization to financially back this project and proudly watched the groundbreaking ceremony last July. With the memorial's dedication slated for 2024, here today to provide us with an update on the memorial is Chief Executive Officer and President of the National Desert Storm Memorial Association Board of Directors and VFW Life member, Scott Stump.
Thank you, Chief, Auxiliary and VFW leadership, auxiliary members, comrades. Good morning. Let me see now. Phoenix in July, Saudi Arabia in August. I'm really not seeing or feeling a big difference, are you? I guess it's like they always told us at 29 Palms. What you're feeling really isn't heat, and you're not really hot, because it's dry heat. Yeah, Semper Fi, Mac. It's a sincere honor and privilege to be here with you this morning. I personally owe a great debt of gratitude to the VFW when, as a young veteran, I joined way back in January of 1992. And I was quickly elevated to post leadership where I served as the post senior vice commander. And I found myself in a unique situation where I was actually leading, guiding, and directing people who were 40 and 50 years older than me. I learned so much from them. The friendships that were cultivated and the mentorship that I received is near and dear to my heart to this day. And unfortunately, they're all gone now. They were World War II veterans. But they live on within me, and the lessons and the examples that they showed are with me in every decision I make throughout the rest of my life. I sincerely hope that all of you in the audience can share similar stories such as mine about the wonderful relationships that are cultivated as a result of our membership in this wonderful organization. Well, I'm here to give you the update on the Desert Shield and Desert Storm Memorial. Now, most of you are probably aware that we're now in the 13th year. Yes, 13th year. And depending on what day it is, I'm the one who usually gets either the credit or the blame for initiating the process back in November of 2010 in the basement of my house. It's kind of a Steve Jobs story without the money. Now, legislation was initially introduced in 2012, in May of 2012. That legislation was subsequently passed unanimously and signed into law on December 19th of 2014. At that point, we entered into the site approval phase. And this is supposed to be an 18-month process. After a lot of toil, heartache, disappointment, indignity suffered by our fellow veterans, we finally made it to the other end after 39 months. And we were able to secure the site at 2300 Constitution Avenue Northwest, which is adjacent to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial as well as the Lincoln Memorials. What a fitting location. And we were able to get that on June. Thank you. We were able to finally secure that location on June 18th of 2018, so it was 5 years ago this past month. Another huge milestone, and you heard the chief mention, another huge milestone occurred in November of 2015, when I personally received the first $100,000 installment of the $500,000 VFW pledge. Now, ladies and comrades, I cannot express to you how important and how critical that donation was. Not just in the amount, but the timing of that donation, which allowed us to go through a process we could not have envisioned would have ever gone on that long. It was absolutely critical to our success and where we are today. I also owe a debt of gratitude, we all do, to a number of you in the audience here this morning. Your posts, your districts, your departments. Georgia, you're a rock star wherever you are. Thank you. Your kind generosity is humbling, and it has truly made a difference. And I know it's not adequate, but all I can say to you this morning is thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your support. It truly has made an absolutely huge difference to get us where we are. So what have we been doing for the last 5 years? Well, you heard the chief talk a little bit about a groundbreaking ceremony last year. We did that a little bit early because the Kuwaiti ambassador was retiring. That's kind of the backstory. I won't get into all of that. But since then, our design team and the artistic team has been hard at work, creating, designing, and now navigating, and we're almost through it, but navigating through the very complicated design approval process. We had the site approval process, now we're back onto the design. And if it was only as easy as sharing our personal preferences, you know, we've always elicited feedback from you all and other veterans. Unfortunately, Washington doesn't work that way. And we're working collaboratively with these approving agencies, and make no mistake, the end product is going to be absolutely breathtaking, and it is going to be a phenomenal memorial to all that happened and all who served back in 1990 and 1991. Now you're seeing some of the slides up here, and I have to give you a warning on those slides. This gives you the different perspectives, and I will tell you that there is no 2D representation that's going to do this justice. Okay, and I would ask all of you to suspend any type of judgment until you actually visit this in person, and I think you're going to be blown away with what you see. We've got a phenomenal team working on this that are extremely talented. Now, of course, the separate design elements that we have that you're seeing on the screen, they're intended to focus on the key themes that we have. Of course, all who answered the call. Some numbers have it over 500,000, some have it over 600,000, but those who answered the call and those close to 400 that did not make it home are at the heart of everything that we do. The unique coalition contribution will also be remembered, and of course, the pivot. And by the pivot, I mean that change in the way that the U.S. public treats, interacts with, and views not just people currently in uniform, but those who have served, all of you, the veterans. I think President Bush said it best before a joint session of Congress on March 8th of 1991 when he said, quote, "We set out to confront an enemy abroad, and in the process, we transformed a nation at home." A lasting transformation that continues on to this day, ladies and gentlemen, thankfully, after the moral stain on our country's soul left by the way so many of our Vietnam veterans were treated upon returning home. Ladies and gentlemen who served in Vietnam, would you mind just standing up? I'd like to recognize you this morning, if you wouldn't mind. Let's give them a hand, please. Thank you for going before us And using a phrase born during Desert Storm, thank you for all of your service. So what do we have left? As we head into the home stretch and approach the finish line, our goal is to receive our construction permit from the National Park Service sometime this September, with the goal of commencing actual construction sometime before the end of this year. And of course, the ultimate goal is to have this completed and dedicated sometime during the first quarter of 2025, which would coincide with the 34th anniversary of Operation Desert Storm. That's hard to believe, isn't it? We're coming in on 35 years almost. So you heard me mention just a few minutes ago about the importance and the critical timing of the VFW donation. And I want to show on the screen, you've got a little slide that shows what they call the donor recognition panel. Okay, this is going to be located on site, very prominently within the footprint of the memorial, and it's for any donor of $1 million or more. And that's stipulated by NPS. We have nothing to do with that, have no control over the amount. And at this point, I need to ask all of you a favor, if that would be right. Okay, I'll get to that in a second, but I need to ask you a favor. I've been working with VFW leadership over the last several years, many who have come and gone, to see about getting the VFW the recognition it deserves and getting the name up on this prominently located plaque. Now, NPS, the National Park Service, estimates that we're going to have between 4.5 and 5 million visitors every year. That's a huge audience, folks. And I know when I first started in the VFW in '92, and I'm sure it's still the same, we always talk about outreach, we talk about getting new members, young veterans in. This is a tremendous opportunity for exposure, and it's a real no-brainer on the return on investment. Now, don't get me wrong, any construction project, you're always going to need more money. I don't care if you're expanding your post, whether you're dealing with a termite issue like I am right now, that's another story, or whether you're building a memorial as we are. An example of that is I just received a few days ago a call from our chief engineer in DC, and the DC water utility is requiring us to move a pipe that's not even in the ground yet, but move it, it's about this big, and move it in another direction, and they're charging us $70,000 for that. You know, this stuff inevitably comes up, and it's to be expected, and I don't want to focus on that this morning because this morning it's all about the VFW. I also need to highlight the fact that this total investment of $1 million would still be on the modest side based upon past support for the projects VFW has been involved in, so it's not out of line. And I would be extremely remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we have a donor who has a matching donor challenge on the table, up to $750,000 dollar for dollar. So that means if VFW does $500,000, this gentleman will match it another $500, it becomes $1 million. It's tremendous. And as the tagline says, nobody does more for veterans, and I don't believe that anybody does. And I know that our Desert Storm veterans, some up on the stage, this show of support would mean a lot to this generation of veterans among our ranks while they're still among our ranks. Now, in the past, some have actually suggested that possibly the posts, the districts, or the departments could bridge this gap. And it could come from that. And folks, at this point, at this juncture, it only makes sense that the national headquarters take hold of this and get it done, while this small crack in the window of opportunity still exists. The last time I was in Phoenix, it was in 2014. It was February. The weather was a little bit cooler. And I received a call to go back to Washington to testify before the Natural Resources Committee in the hopes of getting our bill out of committee and on the floor for a vote and get passed. So I went back, I did my thing in Washington. Of course, it was cold, it was frigid. I came back to Phoenix. Stayed in a hotel. The next morning I got up and I was driving to Los Angeles. And of course, being the eternal tourist, I wanted to see the George Patton Desert Warfare Museum in California, if anybody's been there. I had never been there. It was 2014. I didn't have a smartphone, and I'm not a real smart guy to begin with, so I had 2 strikes against me right out of the gate. So I commenced to get lost. And I found myself in a proverbial ghost town. It's called Desert Station, California. And the only real sense of activity or anything that looked even open was the US Post Office. So I made my way in the post office to get directions. And lo and behold, they're closed for their 2-hour lunch break. So I'm heading out the door, and a gentleman is heading in, and we strike up a conversation. He says something to the amounting to, "Hey, what brings you to Desert Station?" And we got talking, and lo and behold, he was a Vietnam veteran. And I told him, "Hey, I was in Washington yesterday. We're working on this memorial. I had to testify before Congress," telling him the whole story, and he's just taking it all in. And all of a sudden, he got a real big smile on his face. And he said, I knew it. I had you pegged for a colonel the second I laid eyes on you." And then I got a big smile on my face. And I said, "Well, I'm not a colonel. I've never been a colonel. I don't want to be a colonel. I was a lance corporal in the United States Marine Corps." And he said something to me, and all of a sudden the look on his face changed, and he said something to me that I will never forget as long as I live. He looked at me with that funny look on his face, like he stepped in something in his backyard, and he pointed at me and he said, "Why in the world would they have a lance corporal testifying before Congress? That's an important job for important people, not somebody like you." True. So I replied to him as nicely as I could. I said, "Well, sir, a lance corporal testified before Congress because I was the one willing to testify before Congress." And this morning, I would just like to ask all of you to please be the ones willing to just do it. Please approach your department, VFW headquarters, and national leadership and urge them to make this happen and to get the VFW the recognition it so rightfully deserves, and to help bring home this very, very long overdue memorial. Let's do the right thing together, folks. I hope I can count on you. God bless you all. I hope you have a wonderful convention. Thank you so much.